Hello and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate. I am Jude Sandoval, and I am incredibly pleased to welcome today Jennifer Baker to the show. Jennifer is a clinical psychologist who has an emphasis in marriage and family therapy, and she's also the executive director and founder of GoodDads.com. GoodDads.com aims to encourage fathers by providing inspiration, resources, and events to help dads be the best that they can be. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Would you please share with us just a little bit about your background and a little bit about GoodDads.com and maybe the impetus to founding GoodDads.com?
Sure. Well, long ago and far away, I was a classroom teacher. I taught both in elementary school and in high school. And then later on, I moved on to get my master's degree in marriage and family therapy and started working with families. And just became aware there when I was working with families about what a kind of a tough road that dads had, especially when they were divorced or not married to the mother of their child, and how they didn't get a fair shake, I often felt. Then when I went on to earn my doctorate in clinical psychology and become the head of a marriage and family therapy program at a graduate school, we did a lot more work with dads. I taught classes in the jail. We had a very large federal grant where we reached thousands of couples here in Southwest Missouri. And I began to think that initially there we had some marketing efforts that were targeted toward women that were very unsuccessful because people said, well, the people who care about relationships are women. But in fact, what we found, we changed the name of our program and we called it Hitched and Happy. And we developed a radio spot that said something like this: have you ever tried to fix your marriage with duct tape? Well, if you have, it just doesn't work. It's like using a Phillips head screwdriver on a flat head screw. That's why you need Hitched and Happy relationship tools for good old boys. So that was the radio spot.
Because guys fix everything with duct tape, so that's perfect.
It was. And, the amazing thing was, and I'm not making this up, we actually had many guys who pulled their pickup trucks over to the side of the road and called us and said, what is that class, Happy and Hitched, or what's, and they asked us about it. And so we signed up for it. And so it was then that I really became convinced that men really do care a great deal about their relationships, but we need to talk to them in different ways. After the federal grant ended, I spent 4 years being the director of a community mental health clinic. And again, just always felt like if we really want to do something for our family, we have to reach dads. If you get mom and kids in the door, you can do one thing. But if you get dad in the door, you can do so much more. So that experience, coupled with the fact that I've supervised a lot of counselors toward licensure, they have to have so many hours of supervision, and they typically see Medicaid children who are on Medicaid. And I started looking at those stacks of charts I was reading and signing off on every Friday, and most of those children did not have a dad at home. And I got to thinking, wow, what problem are we having that is not related to father absence, and how can we help fathers be more successful with their kids? And finally, we are the home of Bass Pro here in Springfield, Missouri. So I drive by this enormous facility, it's really quite something here in Springfield. And I was just often would sit at the intersection there of, where Bass Pro is located and think, if we could appeal to men the way Bass Pro appeals to men, we could do so many, many things with our families. So that kind of all worked together. And then I began talking to local business people and saying, what if we could do something together? And fortunately had, a bunch of them that said, let's try to do it. So that was about 5 years ago. And today we're doing a lot more than I ever thought we could do, reaching really hundreds of men living here in Southwest Missouri.
Tell us a little. Can you share a little bit about what you are doing?
Well, many of we have 37 elementary schools here in Springfield, and up until COVID-19, which is, changed a lot of things. But in only 8 of those schools, they had the All Pro Dad program. Mm-hmm. And we thought that was such a good thing. We wanted to promote and support that. So we now have, in 22 schools, we have All Pro Dad, encouraging dads to go to school one morning a month, eat breakfast with their kids. And then so feedback we got from those dads is like, well, we want to do events with our kids. So we started putting together dad and kid friendly events. Sometimes moms would come along, but mostly we just try to encourage dads to do that. So we could be good dads fishing with kids, good dads at the Springfield Cardinals, good dads at the zoo. And then of course, we do a weekly e-newsletter and we do podcasts. And then about 2 years ago, the state of Missouri called us and said, why didn't you apply for the Responsible Fatherhood program? And we're like, well, we didn't know about it. And they said, we want to encourage you to apply. So we did. And I was a little worried at that time because most of the dads we would serve would be non-custodial fathers who were at 185% of the federal poverty level. And we had to have 60 dads in the program in 6 months. And so, and 6 months, we had 120. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. And within a year, we had over 200. We had over 3 times as many dads as we had to have. And I said, well, this is how much money you've given us. We're serving 3 times as many people. What about more money? And they said, no. So I said, what do you want me to do? And they said, you could turn people away. And I said, no, I don't really want to do that. And they said, well, you could ask other people for money, which we did. So we've just been astounded, and we've seen dads be reunited with their kids. We've seen some fantastic stories of dads and kids brought together, and it's very heartwarming. It touches us when we see those things. We do graduations for our guys, and the program that they're in is at least 6 months long. So wow. They get help getting a job or getting a better job. We work with them on child support issues. We come alongside them and help them learn to be the best dad that they can possibly be. And we help them with relationship education, because we believe most of them will be in a new relationship at some point, or maybe, in a few cases, they're able to reconnect with the mother of their child in a positive way. So we do all those things, and who would have thought that the need would be so great, but it truly has been, but we've been really blessed to be able to step into that gap.
Well, I know that the need is great, and that's why I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you being here today. The statistics show that children with fathers that are involved in their lives have a much better chance at success and happiness throughout life when fathers are there, are involved, are engaged, are paying attention. So it's an incredibly important thing, and the resources out there are sparse and they're scattered. And so what you're doing there in Missouri is phenomenal. That is awesome. And so in that vein, and also what you stated at the end about relationships, and reading through your blog posts, one of them that caught my attention and I wanted to chat with you about today was the one, just say yes, dear, quote, unquote, quote, yes, dear, unquote. And I'll tell you why it caught my attention. And it's because when my marriage ended, I wanted to look back and learn. As bad as anybody may have as an ex-spouse, we all have culpability in the ending or the failure of a marriage. And so I wanted to look back. I wanted to see what was my part in the marriage, that I was not holding up my end. It was not being as good as I could be. And one of the things that I found was the quote you say in your blog post, working from the philosophy of happy wife, happy life, which is basically, you're going to do everything and anything your wife says in order to make her happy. And as you can imagine, well, I couldn't imagine until until after, and then until I've reworked that philosophy in subsequent relationships, that does not work. Can you speak to that and why that doesn't work?
Why happy wife, happy life doesn't work?
Yes.
Well, I think sometimes it doesn't work because a husband thinks he knows what she should be happy about, but he doesn't really understand. Because people will come in and tell me like, well, after what all I've given her, I mean, she has, and then they'll name off the list of possessions that she has. They'll talk about the lifestyle they've provided. They'll talk about those things, but they don't really talk about why their wife doesn't feel connected to them and how that distance grew between the two of them. So I think men often think much more in terms of concrete things. This is what I've provided for you. I've allowed you to, I've heard, stay home. So she got to stay home with the kids and I went home at work. Just all kinds of things, but not really understanding that what she wanted or what she maybe needed, they never really had a very good understanding of. I don't know if that's
Sure.
helpful.
Is it fair to say that for the most part, women want to be heard, and men don't necessarily understand that they want to be heard, what they're and that's not, and that's different from men who really want to be appreciated for what you stated, the life that they gave, what they're doing, etc. Men feel like, they want to be praised and appreciated for that. Women don't necessarily want to be praised and appreciated. They want to be heard for what it is that what their needs are, what their wants are, whatever it may be, what their feelings are, and that is something that men sometimes are missing.
Yes. I think of course there are always exceptions, and I can think of a couple that would be an exception to that, but in general, I think you're very right in that men want to know that you appreciate what you've done for them. While women will just do any number of things without being thanked or appreciated, or they'll just do that, but they do want to know, am I important to you? Mm-hmm. Do you care about my happiness? Do you care about what's important to me? And if a man doesn't think that whatever she's, let's say she's interested in some sort of area of employment that he thinks is, well, why would you do that? All right, for instance, I can think of several times where he earned a very, very, very good living. And she wanted to take a job that didn't pay that well. And he would say, well, why would you want to do that? I mean, you don't need to do that. I provide for you. And so he would think, well, his view was the most important because he brought in the most money and she should be happy.
Right.
She could go to the country club. She doesn't have to go to work every morning, so she should just be thrilled with what he provides, rather than understanding that maybe the things that she would like to do really make her feel important because she's able to give care to somebody. She's able, to work part-time as a nurse or as a nurse's aide or a teacher's aide or something where she really felt like I'm learning and growing. I think often husbands don't think about the fact that their wives really want to learn and grow as a person too, not just be taken care of.
Sure, exactly. And so now we're kind of getting into your anecdotes around this yes dear philosophy, and your first one being make it safe to connect. So you started referencing that, and when you say make it safe to connect, what you said is what you say in your post is refer to one person's ability to receive input and feedback from the other. Speak to a little bit about how men can make it safe to connect, or how couples can make it safe to connect.
Well, I think there's so many distractions in the world, and even when people are working from home or, socially distancing or whatever, they'll have to take their earbuds out,
Yeah.
Get their eyes off the phone.
I have a teenage daughter. I know what that's about.
My husband loves to listen to podcasts, and I often ask him what he's been listening to, and tell me what you're thinking about that. But it's real easy to put those things in and then just tune everything out. And people need focused attention. So that means sometimes you as a partner, you as a spouse, eye to eye contact, really listening and setting aside time for that to happen. Because then she feels valuable, she feels important, she feels like you really care if you take the time to listen to her and not always tell her what to do, or, just like, oh, well, that sounds challenging. Or if she makes a decision, say, well, I'm curious to see how that'll work out. Maybe I wouldn't have handled it that way, but allowing her the freedom to grow as a person and really listen to, her world, understand her world. Like, I will give couples questions sometimes about, like, what is the most important thing in, Mary's world this week? What is the most important thing in Ben's world this week? What's he thinking about? And sometimes they just don't know. They don't really know their partner well enough to know what it is that is going on with them. And it takes setting aside time to really live.
Lost you again. Oh, you might be back.
Yeah, no, we are.
Okay, there you are.
I'm not sure where you left off. So
no, it was just brief. It was just brief.
Okay.
So that's a great point, because we could literally be distracted from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we go to bed at night, just given the nature of society the way that it is now. And in having anything that's successful, it takes a focused effort, whether you're working a job, whether you're competing at a sport, whatever it may be. And that's the same thing for a relationship at whatever stage, whether you're a divorced father that is just starting the date, or you're blending a family, which has its own unique challenges and would take some focused effort in working through, or you've been married for 20 or 30 years. There's a constant focused effort that is necessary in order to maintain, but also grow. And you made that a great statement about women and men both wanting to grow throughout the relationship. And that's a healthy thing. And it's something that I think often couples lose sight of. Would you agree? Absolutely.
And I think that's so. One person may be more security conscious. Let's just say that if the husband is more security conscious, or the man is more security conscious, he may be thinking, well, that's not a wise decision, or I wouldn't make that decision, or we need to take care of our finances in this way. But if he doesn't really listen to her, it may not be a wise decision to do what he thinks,
Right. And let's talk briefly about skills around communicating. I know that's something that I found was called nonviolent communication, which is a technique that allows somebody to simply state state a situation, how they're feeling about it, what they want to change, and how they want to how they want to move forward. It's a pared down 4-step way. I found that it's amazing. We use it with our family and with my daughters, and communicating with each other, with me and them between each other, and it's amazing to watch them. But it's a phenomenal tool. Can you talk about that a little bit, and the steps, so we can maybe give some real specific practical steps about asking how you're feeling, or creating the space or the time, just maybe a couple of tips around that?
Well, I really like, the idea of creating the space and the time, getting rid of the distractions.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also say that the work of Scott Stanley and Howard Markman, Susan Blumberg in the PrEP approach, and let's say Fighting for Your Marriage, because they've got other things out. I really like their 4 communication danger signs, and I think that's very important to remember. Once I help couples understand this, they never can do it quite the same again, which is good, because we don't want them to.
Right.
When you're escalating, when you're turning up the heat on an argument, that would be one communication danger sign. When you're invalidating the other person's perspective, making it less important than yours, when you're withdrawing or avoiding certain conversations, or when you're making a negative interpretation, when you're assuming that they're doing what they're doing just to make you crazy. Those are all communication danger signs, and those are very predictive of relationship problems. So becoming aware of those, first of all, is the first thing I would say. And then if you can't stop yourself from engaging in those things, you need to take a time out. I have often said to people that when you start doing these things, when you start engaging in the communication danger signs, it's like spraying Roundup on your relationship. And anybody who's a gardener knows the Roundup will kill anything. So yeah, if you want to avoid killing off all the good stuff in your relationship, you have to find a way to manage those things. So even if you never hit your partner, and of course we don't want people to hit each other, but even if you don't do that, you can really do a tremendous amount of damage by just continually invalidating them or escalating, withdrawing or avoiding certain discussions. Those can all really harm a relationship.
Right. Which the avoiding, that's going to lead us to your next antidote. And I also wanted to mention that you talked about Scott Stanley and the research that he's done and his partners have done, and he's got a great book called the Power of Commitment, as well as the website that you just turned me on to, which is lovetakeslearning.com. Those are a couple of resources that are phenomenal. I've read The Power of Commitment. I have not gone to, but I will now go to the lovetakeslearning.com website and go through that to learn as well. And we'll list those in the podcast and the webcast notes as well for people to access as a resource. But so on that note that you about avoiding things, your next point or antidote, I like to call them, to the yes dear, is decide, don't slide, and that's something that is emphasized highly in The Power of Commitment. Can you explain to us what decide, don't slide is?
Well, people will often come in and say to me, we should have been here 6 years earlier, or we should have been here 3 years ago, or whatever. And basically they just slid along. They just let one day go on another day, go on another day, and they knew things were going well. They didn't make a decision until somebody's bags were sitting next to the door and they were on their way out the door. And that's the way things erode over time. You know, those gradual erosion of all the good feelings in the relationship to the place where sometimes it's very hard to reclaim. Even when I am sitting here thinking this couple should be able to make it, they sometimes are not able to. There's just been too much water under the bridge. So that's what happens when you keep sliding and you don't make a decision. So I will tell people, make the call. Even if your partner will not come, you come in, because there's something about having your partner in therapy and they're like, well, so what did she say? And sometimes I'm able to get it. At the time, I'm able to get the other person in as well. But even if I am not able to get the other person in, we are sometimes able to do things that will turn things around, even if one partner comes. So don't say, well, and I've heard people say this, I don't know where they got it, well, it wouldn't do any good if only one of us would come. Like, well, no, because people are creatures of habit, and you have a pattern of the way you communicate with each other. And in fact, I have often said, you know how the argument's going to start. You know who's going to say what, basically. You know how it's probably going to end. You might as well tape record your argument, play it in the living room, and go off and have fun. Because you've done this so many times in the same way that you're going to need to do something different if you want things to change.
Right.
So we can interrupt that pattern. One person can often do some things that'll interrupt the pattern.
Well, yep. And to the men, I would say, being a steward of your relationship, set that example and take that step and do it. And also in the context of divorced fathers, and Scott talks about this in his book, in starting a new relationship and being intentional about the relationship, being intentional about what it is that you are looking for, being intentional about what your objective is to dating when you start to date, being intentional about how you're dating and what the future of that relationship looks like and what the goal of the relationship might
Yeah.
look like. I think, for me, until I read his book, I was just astounded because it described my courtship with my ex-wife and why things ended up as poorly as they did. And now it's helped me in looking in new relationships to be very intentional about who I want to date, why I am dating, and what the outcome of dating is for me, so that every step of the way I'm being intentional. I'm not just sliding into it. And for sliding, an example for dating is sliding is like you go out and then you have some fun together and then maybe you sleep together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this is great. And you're sleeping together and you're having fun together. Oh, and then maybe, one of your leases up and you decide to move in together. And
Right.
so then you're living together, sleeping together, having fun together. And then like things might get a little bit rocky and you might not be totally happy, but you've got the checking accounts together and the house together and maybe you're sharing cars and all of that. And you just kind of slide down this path and then you're like, oh, maybe I'll get married. And then you just get married and then maybe you have kids. And so instead of being intentional about everything that is happening, and that takes what your first antidote is make it safe to connect, connecting and talking and communicating about everything at every step of the way.
Yes, and they have another program called Within My Reach, which is basically for singles. A healthy relationship is within my reach. And one of the things that they talk about are there's a picture of a steaming pot. And the point being that when a relationship is hot and steamy, you don't know what's in the cooking in the
Yeah.
pot. And I don't know if I shared that anecdote or not, but when my husband and I were both in college, he worked in the biology lab. And so occasionally I would walk over to the biology lab and I would walk through, he worked more in the greenhouse, and I would say, what's in the pot? Because there'd be something cooking on the stove and I couldn't tell what was in the pot. And he said, oh, that's roadkill. Like, oh. The biology students would go out and pick up roadkill, and then they would cook it and take all the meat off the bones, and they would study the skeletal structure of little animals in Nebraska where we were in school that had been, killed by a car. But that's a pretty graphic example when I say to people, you don't know what's in the pot. It could be roadkill. Yeah, it's hot and steamy and it looks good, but talk about all those dangerous signs, those things that later on you might go, oh my gosh, why didn't I see that? Well, because you were sliding and it was hot and steamy and it was great at the time, but 2 years in, oh, yeah,
Right.
you made that decision.
Right. And that
to it, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the best analogies I've ever heard. That's great, and that goes to your point in your blog about finding time to think about and process this stuff. You mentioned when couples are having fights, often it's late at night, and everybody gives this advice: don't go to bed mad, etc. And that's not necessarily really good advice. And in this case, if it's hot and steamy, probably don't make a decision right there when it's hot and steamy right away that you're gonna dive right into it. Talk a little bit about like some ways around that, making those decisions when there's a lot of emotion.
Well, okay, first of all, don't start sleeping together right away because that's going to make it even hotter and steamier. But I really like what you said about being very intentional about what do you want? And so sometimes I find that people are dating people who they really wouldn't want to marry, but she's fun or he's fun, or it's, we have a good time together, or, this isn't serious. I mean, like, what are you doing? Because the more time you spend with someone, the more affectionate you become, the more likely you are to be attached to them.
Right.
If this is not, sit down and make a list for yourself of the things that are most important to you. And if he or she is not meeting those things of your top 10 things, then don't date them. Like, don't date someone who you wouldn't want to marry. That's only just a recipe for disaster. And then I think you need to know them long enough period of time and enough circumstances. I also do a number of premarital inventories where we look at a lot of things like, do you want children, and, what's your level of debt, and, all those kinds of things. And a good therapist can help you see, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem for you. You need to go into that relationship with your eyes wide open. And because a blended family, a step family, is more challenging almost always than the original family with mom and dad and, 2 or 3 kids.
Absolutely.
Because you have pre-existing relationships. I mean, you have a longer relationship with your children than you do with that new person.
Yeah, there are a lot of dynamics. And you made a great point. If you have the resources, get a coach, get a therapist, find a resource that can help you work through and talk through some of this stuff, because we all have blind spots. And if you take the time, if you're being intentional and you really want to move forward and are serious about this, take the time to figure it out and talk to somebody and work through it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, I have some ministers, priests, etc., who will send their people to me and say, all right, you've got to go see her. You've got to spend at least 3 sessions with her before I'm going to marry you. So,
Yep.
They're taking it seriously.
That's great. And your last antidote is do your part, right? It's real easy to point to the other person, but all we can control is ourselves, right?
Yes, we say in therapy sometimes there are 3 people who come in. There's the client, or who is the customer. This is the person who really wants to change. There's the complainant. They're just there to complain about somebody else who's not in the room. And then there's a visitor. They're just there because somebody else wants them to be there, but they're not really buying what you have to say. And so with the people who complain, which happens quite often in couple therapy, I really will say, well, I don't see so-and-so, and so I don't think we're going to be able to do anything about him or her, but you are here. Are you interested in some ideas about things you might do? And, if they keep complaining, I'm thinking, well, they're not interested yet.
Right.
At some point, because in almost any relationship we have, especially a relationship that's, longer term, there's a pattern of behavior. There's what we call the dance we do. And, when 2 people are dancing together, if one person changes the way they're dancing, then the other person can't dance in the same way. And that comes out of my background in family systems. It's like, well, we can change what we can do. We can't always predict what our partner will do in response to that, but we can change what we are doing. And oh my gosh, some of the most interesting arguments are with people who don't want to change what they're doing. I really just say, well, look, if what you're doing is working, then don't change it. But otherwise,
but why are you here?
right here. So.
Awesome. Well, so let's just briefly recap the antidotes to yes, dear. First being, make it safe to connect.
Yes.
Find ways to communicate, space and time to do that. Decide, don't slide. Be intentional about what you're doing, the dating, why you're dating, what your end goals are, and then do your part. Make the effort. All you can do is control what you can control, and be a steward of your relationship for the men out there, and then take it from there.
That's right. That's right.
Jennifer, I really appreciate it. We're going to put all of the resources. We're going to put links to gooddad.com. I know you have some membership. You have membership options on the website. Tell us a little bit about that. How anybody out there watching or listening can support gooddads.com.
Well, really, membership is just about supporting the work that we do. So anybody can do that. But everything that we have, if you sign up for it, is a free resource to you. So at least, I think our new Camp Quarantine, which is a thing what dads and kids can do together, there is something to pay for there. But otherwise, most of what we have is accessible to you at no cost. Just sign up for the e-newsletter, the podcast, and our goal is on helping dads be successful and being engaged with their children. That's our that's our big focus.
That's amazing. That's a great focus. We'll have also links to Scott Stanley's book, The Power of Commitment, as well as the website lovetakeslearning.com. And as always, you can go to thedivorcedadvocate.com to find any of these resources and more on my website. Jennifer, thank you so much. I'm so sincerely appreciative of all the work that you're doing for fathers, and thank you.
You're welcome.